The release of more than 4,000 prisoners in Myanmar, ordered by newly installed President Min Aung Hlaing, signals a controlled shift in how power is being presented after years of military rule. One figure stands out immediately. Over 30,000 people have been detained on political charges since the 2021 coup. Now, with sentences reduced and high-profile detainees affected, the question is not just who is being freed, but why this is happening now, and what it reveals about the next phase of Myanmar's political trajectory. If this move stabilizes internal dynamics, it could mark a transition toward limited normalization under military oversight. If it fails, it risks reinforcing cycles of repression and resistance that have defined the country since the coup. The implications extend beyond Myanmar, affecting ASEAN cohesion, regional security perceptions, and how external powers interpret military-led governance models. The roots of this situation trace back to February 2021, when Myanmar's military, known as the Tatmadaw, removed the elected government led by Aung San Suu Kyi. The coup followed disputed elections in November 2020, where Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy secured a decisive victory. The military alleged electoral irregularities without presenting conclusive evidence, then detained key political figures including Suu Kyi and former President Win Myint. This triggered widespread protests, civil disobedience movements, and eventually armed resistance across multiple regions. Since then, Myanmar has experienced a fragmented conflict involving the military, pro-democracy forces, and long-standing ethnic armed organizations. The Assistance Association for Political Prisoners estimates that more than 30,000 individuals have been detained on political grounds since the coup, reflecting the scale of suppression used to maintain control. These arrests have targeted activists, journalists, and elected officials, creating a parallel political structure in exile, while the military retained institutional authority. Min Aung Hlaing's transition from military chief to president formalizes his position at the top of the state hierarchy. His recent inauguration in Naypyidaw included assertions that the country is moving back toward a democratic path, while acknowledging ongoing internal challenges. This framing is important because it positions the amnesty not as a concession, but as part of a broader narrative of controlled political recalibration. The amnesty itself covers 4,235 prisoners, according to state media. Among them are 179 foreign nationals who are set to be deported. The policy includes a systematic reduction framework. Death sentences are commuted to life imprisonment, life sentences are reduced to 40 years, and all other sentences are cut by 1/6. These reductions are applied broadly rather than selectively, which allows the government to present the move as procedural rather than politically targeted. However, specific high-profile cases add weight to the decision. Win Myint has been officially pardoned and released from his remaining sentences under defined conditions. Aung San Suu Kyi, now 80 years old, has had her 27-year sentence reduced by 1/6, according to her legal representation. This adjustment does not remove the charges against her, which her allies have consistently described as politically motivated, but it changes the timeline of her detention. It remains unclear whether she will serve the remainder under house arrest or in continued confinement, and her current location has not been publicly disclosed. Historically, Myanmar has issued amnesties during national milestones such as Independence Day in January and the traditional New Year in April. This pattern provides a precedent, but the scale and timing of the current move, just days after Min Aung Hlaing assumed the presidency, suggest a calculated effort to reshape both domestic and international perceptions. Despite the headline number of releases, data indicates that political prisoners are unlikely to form the majority of those freed. The Institute for Strategy and Policy Myanmar has previously assessed that fewer than 14% of individuals released in earlier amnesties since 2021 were political detainees. This implies that while thousands are being released, the core political opposition network may remain largely intact within detention systems. One possible scenario is that this amnesty is part of a broader normalization strategy. In this case, the military leadership gradually reduces visible repression while maintaining structural control. Limited prisoner releases, sentence reductions, and symbolic gestures toward former leaders could be used to ease external pressure, particularly from ASEAN member states that have struggled to engage with Myanmar since the coup. If this approach continues, it may lead to a managed political environment where opposition exists but operates under strict constraints. A second scenario is that the move has minimal structural impact. If the majority of political detainees remain imprisoned and no meaningful political dialogue follows, the amnesty could be interpreted as a tactical adjustment rather than a strategic shift. Under this outcome, resistance groups may continue operations, and internal conflict could persist at current or increased levels. The reduction of sentences would then function more as a public relations measure than a change in governance. Regionally, the implications are significant. ASEAN has faced internal divisions over how to address Myanmar, with some members advocating engagement and others pushing for stronger measures. A visible reduction in prisoner numbers could provide a basis for renewed diplomatic interaction, particularly if it is framed as progress toward stability. At the same time, external actors will assess whether these actions correspond to measurable changes on the ground. Globally, the situation feeds into broader questions about how military-led governments consolidate authority after seizing power. The combination of legal adjustments, controlled releases, and institutional restructuring reflects a pattern seen in other contexts, where legitimacy is gradually reconstructed without fully reversing the initial power shift. What happens next depends on details that remain uncertain. The proportion of political prisoners actually released, the conditions attached to pardons, and the future status of figures like Aung San Suu Kyi will all serve as indicators of direction. Observers will also monitor whether further amnesties follow and whether they expand to include a higher percentage of political detainees. In the end, this development is less about the number 4,335 and more about the system that produced it. The balance between control and concession, between institutional authority and public legitimacy, remains unresolved. What viewers should watch for next is not just who leaves prison, but how the structure of power adapts in response, and whether these adjustments signal a transition or simply a recalibration of the same underlying order.